My name is Elena Petrov. I was born in a small village surrounded by forests and wide green fields. Our village was quiet, and life moved slowly there. In the morning, birds sang in the trees, and the air smelled fresh and clean. In the evening, the sky turned orange and purple as the sun went down behind the hills. When I think about those days now, they feel like a dream from another life. My family was simple, but we were happy. My father was a hunter. He was tall and strong, with a deep voice and rough hands from years of working in the forest. He knew every path between the trees and every sound the animals made. My mother was gentle and warm. She kept our home clean and always filled it with the smell of fresh bread and soup. She had a small garden behind our house where she grew potatoes, carrots, and cabbage. And then there was my little brother, Ivan. Ivan was 8 years younger than me, and he followed me everywhere. If I walked to the river, he followed. If I climbed a tree, he tried to climb it too, even though he was still too small. He laughed easily and believed I could do anything. To him, I was not just his sister. I was his hero. At that time, I was 16 years old. I helped my mother in the house, and sometimes helped my father in the forest. My father believed girls should learn the same skills as boys. Because of that, he taught me how to shoot his hunting rifle. The first time he placed the rifle in my hands, I felt nervous. It was heavy, and the metal felt cold against my fingers. But my father stood behind me patiently, guiding my arms. "Do not rush," he told me. "A good shot is calm and quiet. Breathe slowly. Listen to the world around you." He set up a wooden target between 2 trees and showed me how to aim. I focused carefully, trying to keep my hands steady. When I finally pulled the trigger, the loud sound echoed through the forest. Birds flew into the sky, and my heart beat fast in my chest. My father walked to the target and smiled. "You see?" he said. "You have talent." After that day, we practiced often. Sometimes we hunted together in the forest. Other times, we simply shot at targets while my little brother watched and cheered for me. Back then, shooting felt like a game. I never imagined it would one day become something else. Everything began to change in the summer of 1941. One morning, the village bell rang loudly and continuously. The sound was strange and urgent. People came out of their houses and gathered near the center of the village. Everyone looked worried. I stood beside my parents while my brother held tightly to my hand. Soon, a soldier from the city stood in front of the crowd. His uniform was dusty, and his face looked tired. When he spoke, his voice was serious. "War has begun," he said. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud. War. At first, I did not fully understand what that meant, but I saw the fear in the faces around me. Some women began to cry quietly. The older men spoke in low voices. My father did not say anything. He only stood there silently. That evening, dinner felt different. The room was quiet. My mother kept looking at my father as if she already knew something. After we finished eating, my father stood up slowly. "Elena," he said, "come with me." We walked outside and into the forest behind our house. The air smelled of pine trees, and the ground was soft under our feet. My father carried his rifle. He stopped near a clearing and turned toward me. "The world is changing," he said quietly. "Soon life will not be as peaceful as it has been." I looked at him, confused and worried. Then he handed me the rifle. "Remember everything I taught you," he continued. "Stay calm, breathe slowly, and never shoot unless you must." I nodded, though I did not fully understand his words at that moment. A few days later, the truth became clear. My father sat with us at the dinner table again, but this time his face looked heavy with responsibility. "I must join the army," he said. My mother froze. The spoon in her hand stopped moving. My little brother looked from one face to another, confused. "Are you leaving?" Ivan asked. My father reached across the table and gently touched his hair. "Yes," he said softly. I felt a tight pain in my chest. "Will you come back?" I asked. My father looked at me for a long moment. I could see both love and sadness in his eyes. "I will try," he answered. The next morning, many men from the village gathered near the road. Trucks were waiting to take them away. Women cried and hugged their husbands. Children clung to their father's coats. I stood beside my mother and brother as my father prepared to leave. Just before climbing into the truck, he walked back to me. He placed something small in my hand. It was his old compass. "You must take care of your mother and brother while I am gone," he said. "I will," I promised. He hugged me tightly, then turned and climbed into the truck. That was the last time I saw my father alive. For several months, letters arrived from him. In those letters, he described long marches, cold nights, and the sound of distant gunfire. But he always tried to sound brave. Every letter ended the same way. "Stay safe. I love you." Then, one winter morning, another letter arrived. But it was not written by my father. My mother opened it slowly. As she read the words, her hands began to shake. The color drained from her face. Then she sat down heavily in a chair and began to cry. I already knew what the letter said before she spoke. "Your father died in battle," she whispered. My little brother did not understand. "Where is Papa?" he asked again and again. No one had the strength to answer him. That night, I walked alone into the forest. Snow covered the ground, and the cold air burned my lungs. I held my father's compass tightly in my hand. For the first time in my life, I felt anger growing deep inside my heart. War had taken my father away, but it was not finished taking things from me. Months later, enemy soldiers reached our village. The day they arrived, the sky was filled with smoke and the sound of explosions. People ran in every direction, screaming and trying to escape. My mother grabbed our belongings quickly. "We must go," she said. I held my little brother's hand as we tried to follow her through the chaos. Then suddenly, a powerful explosion shook the ground. I fell to my knees as dust and smoke filled the air. When I stood up again, everything looked different. People were running, houses were burning. I looked beside me. Ivan was gone. "Ivan!" I shouted. I searched everywhere, but I could not find him. Then I saw my mother lying on the ground. She was not moving. The world around me became silent. In a single moment, everything I loved had disappeared. That night, I hid alone in the forest. The wind moved through the trees, and the cold wrapped around me like ice. I sat there holding my father's compass and staring into the darkness. I cried until there were no tears left. But slowly, something inside me began to change. The sadness turned into anger. The fear turned into determination. The war had taken my father, my mother, and my little brother. It had taken my home and my childhood. As I sat there in the freezing forest, I made a promise to myself. I would not run anymore. One day I would fight back. One day I would become strong enough to face the enemies who destroyed my life. And when that day came, I would make sure they understood the cost of the pain they had caused. At that moment, I did not know how I would do it, but the path that awaited me would lead to something I never expected. A life of cold patience, silent breathing, and deadly accuracy. A life as a sniper. And once I stepped onto that path, there would be no turning back. The night I lost my family, I stayed hidden in the forest until the sun rose. The cold wind moved through the trees, and the ground beneath me was frozen. I barely slept. Every small sound made my heart jump. I kept thinking enemy soldiers would find me at any moment. But morning finally came, and the forest slowly became brighter. Thin sunlight moved through the branches, and the snow on the ground began to shine softly. I stood up slowly. My body felt weak, and my legs were shaking. I had not eaten since the day before. My throat felt dry, but the cold air made it hard to swallow. For a moment, I thought about returning to the village. Maybe my brother was still alive. Maybe someone had found him. But when I walked closer to the edge of the forest and looked down at the village, my heart sank. Smoke still rose from many houses. Some buildings had burned completely. Soldiers were walking through the streets. I could see their uniforms, even from far away. I quickly stepped back into the trees. At that moment, I understood something very clearly. There was nothing left for me in that village. My home was gone. My family was gone. And the enemy had taken everything. I walked deeper into the forest that day, moving carefully and quietly. My father had taught me many things about survival. I remembered how to find clean water in small streams and how to follow animal paths through the trees. For 2 days, I walked alone. At night, I slept under large trees and wrapped my coat tightly around my body to stay warm. I ate small berries and roots that I found in the forest. On the 3rd day, I saw something that surprised me. In the distance, smoke was rising between the trees. At first, I felt afraid. I thought it might be enemy soldiers again. But as I moved closer, I heard something different. Voices. They were speaking my language. I carefully stepped out from behind a tree and saw a small group of people sitting around a fire. Some of them wore old military uniforms. Others wore simple village clothes like mine. They were not soldiers from the enemy. They were resistance fighters. One of the men noticed me standing there. He quickly stood up and looked at me carefully. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Elena," I said quietly. The man studied my face for a moment. Then his expression softened. "You are safe here," he said. Those words almost made me cry. The group gave me warm soup and bread. It was the first real food I had eaten in days, and the warmth spread through my body like sunlight. Later that night, I told them my story. I told them about my father joining the army, about the letter that said he had died, and about the attack on my village. When I finished speaking, the people around the fire were silent. One woman reached over and placed her hand gently on my shoulder. "You are not alone anymore," she said softly. The group was led by a man named Victor. He was older than the others, maybe around 40. His face was serious, and his eyes looked tired, as if he had seen many terrible things during the war. "These forests are our home now," Victor explained. "We fight the enemy from the shadows." I listened carefully. The resistance fighters attacked enemy supply trucks, destroyed equipment, and gathered information for the army. They moved constantly, never staying in one place for too long. I stayed with them for several weeks. At first, they did not allow me to help very much. I cooked food, cleaned weapons, and carried supplies when the group moved to a new hiding place. But inside my heart, the anger I felt was still burning. One evening, Victor was sitting near the fire cleaning his rifle. I walked over and sat across from him. "I want to fight," I said. He looked up slowly. "You are still young," he replied. "War is not something you should want." "They killed my family," I said quietly. "They took everything from me." Victor studied my face for a long moment. "Many people here have lost someone," he said, "but fighting requires more than anger. It requires patience and discipline." I did not answer, but I did not move either. Finally, he sighed. "Can you shoot?" he asked. I nodded. "My father was a hunter," I explained. "He taught me." The next morning, Victor took me deeper into the forest. He placed a small metal can on a tree stump about 50 meters away. "Show me," he said. He handed me a rifle. My hands felt steady as I lifted the weapon. The weight felt familiar, almost comforting. I remembered my father's voice. "Stay calm, breathe slowly." I aimed carefully and pulled the trigger. The sound echoed through the trees. The metal can jumped and rolled off the stump. Victor raised his eyebrows slightly. "Again," he said. This time he placed the can farther away. I adjusted my aim and fired again. The can fell once more. For a moment, Victor did not speak. Then he nodded slowly. "You do have talent," he admitted. After that day, my life began to change again. The resistance fighters started teaching me more advanced skills. I learned how to move silently through the forest, how to hide my tracks in the snow, and how to watch enemy movements without being seen. But the most difficult training was still ahead. One afternoon, Victor handed me a different rifle. It was longer and heavier than the hunting rifle my father had used. "This is a sniper rifle," he said. I held it carefully. "What is different?" I asked. "A sniper must be invisible," Victor explained. "You may lie in the same place for hours without moving. One mistake can reveal your position." He pointed toward a distant tree. "Your target will not always be a metal can," he said quietly. His words sent a chill through my body. That night, I could not sleep. I lay under the dark sky, staring at the stars above the forest. I kept thinking about the path I had chosen. If I became a sniper, I would take human lives. But then I remembered my mother lying on the ground in this burning village. I remembered searching for my little brother and never finding him. And I remembered the letter that said my father had died in battle. The anger returned. The pain returned. By morning, my decision was clear. When Victor saw me, he asked one simple question. "Are you ready for the training?" I nodded. "Yes," I said. The training was harder than anything I had ever experienced. We practiced for hours every day. Victor forced me to lie in the snow without moving, sometimes for an entire afternoon. "Control your breathing," he repeated again and again. My muscles ached. My fingers became numb in the cold, but I refused to give up. Slowly, my aim became better. My body became stronger. My mind became calmer. Weeks turned into months, and little by little, I stopped feeling like a frightened girl hiding in the forest. Instead, I began to feel like something else, something sharper, something more dangerous. One evening, Victor sat beside the fire and looked at me seriously. "You are ready," he said. "Ready for what?" I asked. He looked into the darkness beyond the trees. "For your first mission." A quiet silence filled the forest. My heart began to beat faster. After months of training, the moment had finally arrived. But deep inside, I knew something else too. Once I took my first shot in battle, there would be no turning back. The night Victor told me I was ready for my first mission, I felt a strange mix of emotions inside my chest. Part of me felt nervous, but another part felt calm and focused. For months I had trained for this moment. Every long hour lying in the snow, every lesson about patience and silence had led to this point. Still, the idea of my first real battle made my heart beat faster. The next morning, Victor gathered our small group around the fire. The forest was quiet, and the sky was gray with heavy clouds. "Enemy soldiers are using the road near the eastern hill," Victor explained. "They send patrols there every day." He looked directly at me. "Elena will watch the road from the hill. Her job is simple: observe first. If necessary, take the shot." The others nodded, but no one spoke. Victor then handed me my sniper rifle. I held it carefully, feeling its familiar weight in my hands. Before we left, Victor said something quietly to me. "Remember what I taught you. A sniper must control fear." I nodded. "I will." We began walking through the forest before sunrise. The air was cold, and frost covered the ground. Our steps were quiet as we moved between the tall trees. After almost an hour, Victor stopped near a small hill that overlooked the road. "This is your position," he said. From there, I could clearly see the narrow road below. Enemy trucks and soldiers sometimes used that road to move supplies. Victor pointed to a group of thick bushes near the top of the hill. "You will hide there," he said. Then he placed his hand on my shoulder. "We will be nearby," he added, "but this moment is yours." I crawled slowly into the bushes and settled into position. The ground was cold beneath me, but I ignored the discomfort. I placed the rifle carefully in front of me and looked through the scope. The road below looked quiet and empty. For a long time, nothing happened. Minutes passed, then an hour passed. The hardest part of being a sniper was not shooting. It was waiting. I stayed completely still, just as Victor had trained me. My breathing was slow and steady. The forest around me was silent, except for the soft movement of the wind. Finally, I heard something. Voices. Soon after, 2 enemy soldiers appeared on the road. They were walking slowly and talking to each other. My heart began to beat faster. I lifted the rifle slightly and looked through the scope again. The soldiers became larger in my view. One of them laughed about something. The other kicked a small rock on the road as they walked. They looked like ordinary men. For a moment, my finger froze on the trigger. I remembered Victor's words. A sniper must control fear. Then other memories filled my mind. I saw my father smiling proudly while teaching me to shoot in the forest. I saw my mother lying on the ground during the attack. I heard my little brother calling my name before he disappeared. The pain inside my chest became stronger. I slowly breathed in. Then I aimed carefully. The rifle was steady. I pulled the trigger. The loud crack of the shot echoed through the hills. One soldier immediately fell to the ground. The other shouted in shock and tried to run. I adjusted my aim and fired again. The second soldier collapsed beside the road. Then everything became silent again. My hands trembled slightly, and my heart pounded loudly in my chest. I had fired many shots during training, but this moment felt completely different. I had taken a life. For a moment, I simply lay there, staring through the scope at the empty road. Soon, Victor appeared beside me. "You did well," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but I could see respect in his eyes. I slowly lowered the rifle. "I thought it would feel different," I whispered. Victor nodded. "War changes everyone," he said. That day was the beginning of a new life for me. After my first mission, the resistance group trusted me more. I joined more operations, always moving carefully through forests and fields. Each mission made me stronger and more disciplined. Sometimes I waited for hours in freezing weather without moving. Sometimes I watched enemy camps from far away, learning their patterns. Slowly, people in the resistance began to speak about me with quiet respect. They called me the Silent Hunter. But even as I became a skilled sniper, I never forgot why I had chosen this path. Every time I looked through the rifle scope, I remembered my family. The war lasted for many long years. During that time, I saw many terrible things. Villages destroyed, families separated, friends lost in battle. But I also saw courage. I saw ordinary people stand up against fear. I saw soldiers protect each other like brothers and sisters. And through it all, I continued fighting, not only for revenge, but for hope. Years later, when the war finally ended, the forests became quiet again. The guns stopped firing, and the long nightmare slowly faded away. One day, I returned to my old village. The houses had been rebuilt, but many faces were gone forever. I stood in the place where my childhood home had once stood. The wind moved softly through the grass. I held my father's old compass in my hand. For a long time, I simply stood there in silence. The war had taken everything from me, but it had also given me something unexpected: strength, courage, and the understanding that even in the darkest times, a person can still choose to fight for what is right. My name is Elena Petrov. Once, I was just a village girl, but the war turned me into something else: a survivor, a fighter, and a sniper who refused to let the voices of the past be forgotten. Thank you for listening to this story on Cozy English Story. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story and want to improve your English through powerful real-life inspired stories, please like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel Cozy English Story. Your support helps us create more emotional and inspiring English stories for learners around the world. And before you go, tell me in the comments, what would you do if you lost everything in war? Would you choose revenge or a different path? I would love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next story on Cozy English Story.